Welcome back, folks, to Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner. With me, as always, is the czar of salads, the salad czar.
This is Sal. How y'all doing? Glad to be here. Ready to hear some more stuff from Chief, man.
Yeah, we're in here. Which, you know, what we did was we cut that because we just kept going.
Yeah.
And so we ended up cutting, and I know, folks, it's hard. You had to wait a whole week to get back in it. No, seriously, but we had to cut it. And we got Chief in the studio still. We're still talking.
How's it going, guys?
Cadejo and the Pendejo and all the other hoes that we're talking about.
Jalapeno.
But we can still, you know, before we get right back into it, man, we can still plug the email real quick, you know.
You do the honors.
Right.
Go ahead.
Folks, just remember, DasWolfman88@gmail.com, or you can send it to our other email, wolfandsal@gmail.com.
Wolfandsal@gmail.com.
Yeah, and if you're still unsure, look at the description there on the channel. Both of those emails are right there. You can see the little writing down there, description. Get it from there and put it in there. We want to hear your story.
Unfortunately, like I said, if you scrutinize one of the episodes, the N is missing.
Yes.
So I had people hitting me up on Messenger like, Das Wolfma? And I kept trying, you know, I'm like, okay, come on, man.
Yes, you know.
Yeah, and that actually did happen, folks. Somebody complained that it was not right. But that, like I said, that's Tony's fault. We have flogged him and kept him. He had to eat cat food for a week. So, you know.
Exactly. So, man, I tell you what, we couldn't stop last time with Chief, you know, and just to recap real quick, you know, we were just going along on this whole deal about the area around Taylor, Manor, Elgin, all those areas in that part of Texas, you know, and you left us with this thought, Chief. You were talking about how the Cadejo, right, this devil dog with red eyes, had been spotted a lot around crops, you know, and you were lining those up, the correlations with all the other seemingly weird stuff we'd been talking about in reference to the Cadejo. So please carry on, brother.
Yeah, that's right, Sal. It was just I just thought it was either correlation or maybe coincidence, because there was some reports out of Mission that the Cadejo was being sighted around crops, and I thought it was, you know, coincidence, correlation with the Taylor area.
Yeah, and Mission, folks, is nowhere near this area. It's 6 hours away. But the correlation is, I get what you're saying. I think my theory, if I could talk about that, what I think is the Taylor thing, there was a lot of satanic activity at one point that was going on in and around Taylor, and with the that was back in the 80s and 90s, you know? And I know that there were a lot of supposed people were finding in their barns, and I know that my nephew, you know, went into an abandoned building and he saw pentagrams drawn on the walls and all kinds of weird stuff that was going on at that time. Or not at that time, it just was going on for, you know, off and on for a long time. And so I just remember as a kid, though, you know, there was like some kind of special they did on TV about it, you know, like Taylor having some sort of, you know, witchcraft. So it didn't surprise me that there was a black dog flap going on off and on. And, you know, as far as like seeing him in crops, I can't attest to that. I haven't heard of that. But I know that at one point there was UFO activity too near Hutto. I remember hearing about it not too long ago, actually. Some woman near Hutto saw a UFO, just read it in passing, you know, and there was a woman that saw one near Buda. I think we talked about that.
Yeah.
You know,
funny,
this whole area.
On 29, some coworkers said they spotted a UFO, and that's right between Elgin and Taylor.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean,
Hutto's, it's right there.
Are these UFOs dropping off black dogs? Are they dropping off black dogs? Are they dropping off Dogman, Wendigo, and Bigfoot? Who knows? Sasquatch.
When you think about that topic of the link, is there a link between UFOs and Bigfoot / Dogman and some of these other strange cryptids people report? You know, there was a guy out there, his name is Stan Gordon. He follows that particular niche, the whole question of, is Bigfoot and, you know, UFOs, are those connected? I haven't heard anything about Dogman from him, but, you know, his big thing that got him started was around the time the Kecksburg incident happened in Pennsylvania, where that supposedly a crashed UFO hit, and government came in, sealed off the area, and they took out this particular object that was kind of shaped like an acorn.
Where was this at?
In Kecksburg, Pennsylvania.
It's nowhere near where we live.
Yeah, but the whole point is that this is his niche, and he showed up on scene. Oddly enough, he was on the scene not too long after that happened, and that's what got him started down that path.
Okay, I care not about this guy and his Pennsylvania, as you call it. I'm kidding, folks. Seriously, that is weird.
Pennsylvania, never heard of her. No, I'm just kidding.
No, seriously, Pennsylvania, that's a state that has a hotbed of activity, too.
Oh, yes, they do.
I think it's Germantown,
yes,
Ohio.
That's not too far away.
That's right there. And I know that Ohio and Pennsylvania both have a lot of activity.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I was going to say, the other day when we were talking about the Dogman that had the thing riding on its back. Do you remember that?
Yes. You're talking about
at the circus kind of
No,
deal?
No, it was
about
actually, we were BDRP interview. Was it the BDRP interview?
We mentioned the film footage by Scott Carpenter, and he's the guy that I call him a pioneer.
Tell Chief about it because he doesn't know.
You know, Scott Carpenter is a Sasquatch / Dogman researcher, and he's got his area. He lives, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he lives up in Tennessee, and he has his area that he goes and walks the trail, and he pioneered the whole deal, putting a camera on the back over his shoulder. I don't know whether left or right, but it's a backward facing camera.
Kind of like a GoPro kind of deal.
Yeah, but it's facing backwards, something that a lot of research has not done. And he's captured a lot of interesting photos and footage, utilizing that technique. And one of the ones that's internet famous within the Bigfoot and Dogman community is he got what seems to be an image of a dogman and has like a little gray UFO alien up on its shoulder.
Wow.
It's interesting. I thought that was really, it was just mind-blowing first time I saw it, man.
Is this a video or a picture?
Yeah, well, it's a picture from a video, the one he posts up there, but he does have the video. You should check out his channel, Scott Carpenter. And a lot of interesting stuff. The guy comes across very no-nonsense. And, to me, that's just some correlation to what we first started talking about, the UFO, Bigfoot, or Dogman connection. I mean, is there one? I'm inclined to think yes. How much of it, I don't know. But there seems to be some type of correlation.
I've heard a lot of interesting talk about that. I've heard there was a story I listened to on one of these shows, and I can't remember. I was on my way to the coast or something, and there was something playing, and I just remember listening to it, and there was a guy saying that he believed that there was a dog man that was stalking around his property. And don't quote me, folks, because I wasn't really like 100%, but I just remember the story. There was story after story playing on this channel. I can't remember which one it was. And the guy was saying that there was a dog man stalking around his property that he believed was being controlled by a UFO. Because he would see a UFO, then he would see this dog man. He thought that they were dropping it off.
Wow.
And that it would flop around on the ground and it would like shake its arms and legs back and forth, and that it just kept bouncing up and down. And he thought that they were controlling it.
Some kind of teleportation or
and like either
tracking.
they had messed with its brain. That's what this guy was claiming. I mean, it was crazy. And I can't even remember what it was. I know, Anthony, you were with me on that trip. Do you remember that story we were listening to when we were going through it was at the Cuero. We were like near Cuero and the
Cuero Gobblers.
Gobblers, yeah, because we were talking about the Gobblers because they have a great football team and every year the Gobblers. But we were going through Cuero, whatever, and I was like, that's crazy, that story. And I just remember I was really tired and I didn't remember, my wife was listening to it and I was like, well, she was kind of in control of the radio, so I was just like, I was kind of part like half listening. Yes, and it got kind of weird, it was like this story that this guy was telling, but then I actually heard a story that was kind of weird, like, like somebody that sent me a little snippet or something, and you get all kinds of crazy stories, but this person sent me a story that was just like completely, that they saw, and I remember I told you this, maybe, that they saw these aliens like leave a Bigfoot.
Yeah. That's in
the UK, wasn't it in the UK, like in Wales or something like that? And they said that the lady sent us a story. There's a guy and a girl, actually, because he got his, actually it wasn't his wife, it was his sister, to kind of confirm the story or whatever. And they sent me a story, then she followed up with me, but it was like they saw what looked like a craft, but it wasn't a disc shaped craft, but it was like kind of oddly enough, it's shaped like Tony's hat. This hat you're wearing here,
bucket hat.
Tony's
wearing a
bucket hat kind of shape. Yeah, it was the way that they drew the little image or whatever, and that this thing landed, and like I said, this is their story, but it's just weird that I've heard this theme before. I look at threads, that you can pull, and then it kind of correlates with other stuff. But these people claim that they left a Sasquatch looking creature, and that when they departed, they walked right up on it, and it was breathing, it was still alive, and they were like, "Wow, this is crazy." And then they ran back to the house, whatever, to go grab the camera. Of course, it was gone. Yeah, how convenient. But who knows? Maybe it's real, maybe it's not. But they kind of like pushed it that they really believed. And the guy's like, "Look, I'm not crazy. I really haven't had any other experiences, but I did see that." Wow. And so they left me with that. And people will say that, though. They're going to be like, "Oh, well, they walked because when they were walking and they saw this, they were near their house. Yes, they walked out." Just curious, and they saw what it was, and they ran back to the house, and then it was gone. Well, who's to say that the aliens weren't in control of this thing?
That's true.
And that maybe they knew what they were going to do, and so that they woke it up and used it. And some people have said, I've heard different people claim that they honestly believe that these things they're looking through their eyes. They're controlling them. Not all of them, but some of them seem to be like robotic,
So almost an Attack of the Body Snatcher kind of parasite,
starring Sasquatch and Dogman
and Donald Sutherland.
And what is the characters from Rampage, starring Ralph and George?
Yeah, there you go. Well, I'll tell you, man. I mean,
starring Wreck-It Ralph.
The stuff that people report out there. Like you said, you've listened to a lot of people's stories. You've talked to a lot of people, and I know. In time, the more you get exposed to people's stories, you'll be able to, separate as DDoS says, separate the wheat from the shaft. The shaft. I think
you're saying I can do that now?
No, that's not what I'm saying. You can, but so when someone is giving you a load of bull, you can.
That's why I don't
differentiate. I think you've listened to enough that you can.
Yeah,
do that,
yeah. I was confused. I was like, wow, you think I can't do that now?
Yeah, no.
With the Dogman stories, they're very popular, and when somebody gives me one, I just tell it. If it's not a truth, if it's an untruthitude, Your Honor, I apologize. Right? If it's the truth, then it is, because and I try to talk to people as much as possible. Yes. This whole week, as I got like several interviews slated. We got a guy that we're going to be talking to, folks. Dogman property. We're going to be talking to him again, and we're going to have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about with that guy, because we've actually talked to him on a couple occasions in person, and he's, we never even scratched the surface with what he had to tell us.
The last time we spoke with him, he said, "Oh no, I still got a lot more stories to tell."
Not just that happened to him, but other people on this property.
Yes,
yeah, and so. And it is here in Central Texas too, and so there's a lot of stories that we have that we've collected, and I was going to talk to you, Chief. You have another story to tell, but before we left off last time, I wanted to tell a story involving the Cadejo creature. I wanted to tell you guys that. Now, you might have heard this, Armando, but I know people at home haven't heard it, and I wanted to tell you, Chief. There is a property that we used to do security at, and I cannot say the property because I would get in trouble, but it is in Austin, in the city limits of Austin, and at this property we had a particular guard that worked there regularly. I would say he worked there 4 days a week or 5 days a week, and then I believe that one of my nephews would actually work the other 2 days or whatever, 2 to 3 days, and he swore up and down that he saw what looked like a shadow, I would say the way he described it was a cat mixed with a canine type shadow entity, and it was floating in the air. Now, when he first told me that, I didn't go, "Whoa, that's crazy, whatever, dude," because I had actually heard there was a lady that used to go to a friend of mine. He's very religious. They go to church regularly, and there was a lady. He said that, he goes, "I know you collect these creepy stories." He's like, "I know this lady that goes to our church, and she claims that she saw a demonic cat." Well, when I actually spoke to this woman and she gave me her story, it was very similar to this story that I'm telling you. very creepy, you know. And of course, I was thinking a cat. You know, what is this, like Pet Cemetery cat, or is this like a, you know what I mean? Like I didn't know what kind of cat these people were talking about. But so I ended up like interviewing her, and so when I talked to her, and it was prior to this incident that happened at this property. What happened at this property was this guy said he was doing his rounds. He came around the corner. He saw this shadowy looking cat type entity. He said it was like it was sitting, you know how the Sphinx sits?
Yes.
And he put his arms out in front of him, and he kind of leaned forward. He said that it was like kind of squatting, but it just kind of floated up. And then the legs kind of just disappeared, and there was like this kind of swirling shadow, and that he could see the head clearly, and then it kind of morphed almost into like a canine-looking thing, and then went down into the ground, and then it stayed there on the ground for a long time. That it just sat, it was just there on the ground as a black spot, blacker than the night, as he described it. Went and got back in his car and just kind of stayed in the back of the property for a while, because this was at the front of the property. And then he said when he finally got, you know, he's like, it's been 3 hours. I got to do my round because you're, you know, on camera, you know?
Yes.
And so he went back and did his rounds. And that's actually how I got into the conversation with this guy, because I was told by the property, hey, he didn't do his rounds for 3 hours. So when I looked on the camera, I did see a shadow. I did see something, but I couldn't make it out what it was because the cameras were so horrible. But he walked back around to the front of that property, and he went and he looked at this shadow. And I actually saw him doing it on the camera, okay, with the property. I went and I looked. Like I said, the very, very horrible old antiquated cameras. But you could see him doing it, and he looks at it, and he sees what this is. Well, he snaps a photo of it. And at that point, I see him running away from whatever is on the ground. I didn't see like what it was when it was floating. It did look like there was something blowing in the wind or whatever, but it was so horrible. The camera, like I said, you couldn't make out anything. And this is what he claimed he saw. He said that he saw a face like in the middle of this black circle that was just like a shadow. And he said it was like a face. It was just looking up at him. Like it was just like eyes, and you couldn't make out a nose, but there was a mouth and it was moving.
Wow.
And he said that he got a sense of like terror, like, you know, whatever. He held the camera over, he took a picture, and he ran off. Well, the picture just looks like a blurry streak because he just does it real quick and runs away. And then on the camera, though, you can actually see like what looks like it kind of disappears. Like it's just like it kind of, you see it gets lighter on the road. Yeah, it was just kind of like boom, and it's just like it gets light really quick. Now the guys that work with me at this company, like, and of course, like my nephews and my brother and everybody, they know about this incident. They know about what happened with this guy because he didn't make any bones about what he saw. That's weird. And it just kind of like, he said that it was just there for like 3 hours. It just sat there on the ground, and then it went into the ground. He said that for a couple of days after that, he had dreamed about it, like, you know, and that it was trying to talk to him, but it was something evil that it was telling him. And then, of course, I get a phone call, and he's like, I'm quitting. And he quit.
That's freaky.
His wife said that, you know, he woke up kicking at her, you know, in his sleep. And yeah, it was really weird. And then, but, you know, I kind of believed his story, that he believed that story, you know, but I believed it in the way that I had interviewed a woman from a church. And I'll tell you about that. There was a woman that claimed that her house was being haunted by a demon. Well, she was very adamant that it was a demon, you know, and I'm like, okay, well, what are we dealing with here, you know? Can you describe said demon, you know? And she's like, it's a demon. And I'm like, okay. And she was, you know, we're off the cusp, you know, like, of course, very devout Christian, they'll say everything's a demon, right?
Like the kukui?
The kukui, everything's a kukui, everything's a demon. So she was convinced that it was demonic. And so when I tried to talk to her about it, she didn't want to talk about it on the phone because apparently it would hear her. That's how freaked out she was.
That's freaky.
So I had to go and meet her down the street at this store, in front of this store, where she sat there talking to me, and she was just like moving around and, you know, like just real frantic when she was talking. And I said, look, I can't follow you because you're moving around the vehicle. And she's just very distraught. And she was very spiritual, you know, very high strung.
Mm-hmm.
And so she just went on this story, you know, and of course I couldn't get a whole lot out of her that first time, so I had to go back, and I went with a friend of mine, and Chief knows who he is, but we actually went back and talked to her, and she told me, you know, the whole story when she was calmer.
Yeah.
Because I just said, look, I'm going to be real honest with you, I can't really get the whole, but according to her, her daughter had developed an illness because of this thing. It started when they first moved into this house. They did renovations. You hear that a lot. It starts so they did some remodeling, and then something came out of the floor when the daughter was playing on the floor. I think the daughter was 10, something like that, and she saw this shadow-looking thing come up out of the floor, but it morphed into like a cat, and it was like that you could touch the cat, and it had solidity. But then it would just vaporize too. And it had red glowing eyes, and then it would crawl up onto the bedspread. And then she said that the first time she saw this, she's like, Mommy, it's the cat. And the cat would talk to her. And the cat gave itself a name, which she said, I can't even pronounce it. It sounds like it's Arabic or Jewish or something. And she said that it's like Middle Eastern, you know. And she said the name is like some weird, you know, I know this isn't correct, but like Abba Kook or some weird name. Like I couldn't see. That's what she said it was like, you know, but I couldn't even begin to try to pronounce it, is what she's telling me. And I'm like, so the cat would be invisible, but they would see the bedspread moving, and they would see it move around, and they had a dog and a cat, a real dog and a cat. Well, I'm not saying this wasn't real, but I'm saying like a flesh and blood, earthbound dog and cat, and that they would get attacked. And that this thing would attack their animals. They had a bird in a cage, and it died. And it looked like the head had been twisted, you know.
Oh, God, the poor fish.
The fish. And so whenever this thing would do these antics that it would do, the lights would come on and off, you know, and that she had some toys that would come on and off, you know, and she would always say Abba Kook was doing the whatever, you know, that's what's doing this cat, you know. So the cat said that it was very old, that it had been living at that spot for a long, long time.
Wow, maybe it
had a whole backstory,
demon kind of deal. How they've always got a name.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. It was some sort of evil entity or whatever. But this thing was like, and so she had the preacher come, and of course this thing decides that it's not going to perform. So the preacher comes in there and is like, I don't see anything. There's nothing going on. You can't blame the guy. I mean, it didn't do anything when he was around, but as soon as he would leave, at one point she said that she got slapped, and then this demonic cat would appear in the window like floating. And that she said that also that it would appear like she was going out to a shed, like there was a little small garden, there was like a little shed, and she was going out to past the garden to get a tool or the shed to get a tool for the garden. And she saw that it was daylight outside, but it was dark in the shed, and she heard like this growling. I can't do sound effects, but she heard this, you know, and that there were these two red eyes, and she could see them blinking in the darkness. And I've heard that thread before too, in like somebody's closet. And she said that she heard the growling, and she thought, "Oh my gosh, what is this? You know, is this some new shenanigan?" And as she got closer, she's like, first I thought I was just, this is just, my mind.
Yeah.
But as I got closer, I realized it was coming from the shed. It wasn't like a neighbor's dog or anything like that. And she said that we just had a privacy fence, and there was dogs on the other side. It might have been one of them, And she said she saw a paw come out of the shed, and she saw the beginning of a snout, and she said it looked canine.
Wow.
So it went from being a cat to being like a dog, like creature, if that's the same thing. We don't know that it is the same entity. We know that this was happening. So then she was telling us that she got a phone call in the middle of the night, and that something was, it sounded like to her something was speaking backwards. Yeah. Wow. And so the remodeling, the people that she had that were doing the remodeling, they ended up screwing up something, and then they stiffed her, they took, which happens with contractors, they screw you over, and then they didn't come back. So she had a room that was unfinished and a bathroom that was unfinished. So she had to get the money together to get a new contractor. They basically ripped her off. And she never heard from them again, but she didn't know if it was because they saw something or what, And yeah, it was real weird. And then she said that at one point the TV came on, and there was like this cat looking face, on the TV with this weird wide looking smile, but it was like really sharp, big looking teeth. when this frizzed out looking hair, the way she described it. And so I'm sitting there going like, what could this be? What is this thing that people are seeing? And is this related to what we're talking about? These shadow cat, dog creatures, are they related? Are they the same thing? Or is this just a form of these things? Like if you're Arab, it's a jinn. If you're a Christian, it's a demon. What it is, we know for sure is evil and demonic. And I will say this, that these incidents, these things that are happening, it's on the rise. You're hearing more and more about these things. You get reports now. I'm starting to get reports almost daily of like these incidents where people they've experienced the haunting and it's demonic. It's evil.
It's malignant.
It's a malignancy. Absolutely.
Right.
It's not benign. They're not just like they're interacting with people. They're hurting people. They're scratching people. She moved out of the place.
Disgruntled, benevolent, evil.
Malevolent.
Malevolent.
Yeah.
No, benevolent would be better. Yeah.
Benevolent would be good, but malevolent would be bad.
Malevolent.
Yeah.
Right.
So she was reporting this, and that the child actually was starting to. She had scratches on her. She said that the cat was attacking her in her sleep. It would jump on her, and it was becoming more and more aggressive. One of the cat that they had ran away. And so she eventually just left that place and was just paying the bills on it, even though she wasn't there, and she was staying at her mom's. And she asked me if there's anything I could do about it, and I was just like, "Look, I am not a priest. I can't do anything for you. The only thing I could do, is just get your story, and so people will know that these things are happening. That's all. I mean, I can't do anything for you. I felt horrible because you can't do anything for these people. I could warn against, I asked her if her child had played with Ouija board, if there was any sort of magic that had been done or anything like that. But she did not have anything to tell me whether or not there was something that, So anyway, that's that story. And so, I kind of had a feeling when I was talking to that guard that he was being truthful, that he did see some sort of shadow-looking cat type creature.
I wonder if people are perhaps mistaking the Cadejo or Black Dog or Dogman with some of the Panther, because I know in the Wilbarg area we were getting Panther sightings.
Yeah, well, that's that whole corridor too, where we talk about the Black Panthers. Yeah, in that whole area.
Now that's really odd. I mean, you got this obviously paranormal entity that the child got sick because of. It was being attacked because of that, and then the guard, all this stuff. Maybe it's the entity itself, or those types of entities, like to take the shape of a black dog. Cadejo. The Cadejo. And that's really interesting to me because I've never heard anything along that genre about these black shapes that turn into feline and then to a canid type creature.
Back and forth.
Yeah, back and forth. It's really interesting. Folks, if you have had something like that, hey, send your story in because this is really interesting. And on that note, you guys just mentioned the Black Panther, and I just remembered a story about family members, and I think I mentioned it before in another episode. But this past weekend, I saw some family, holiday, everybody enjoying Easter and all
Easter
this good
weekend.
stuff. And I asked about,
You went to Brownwood?
No. I just I went up to Copper's Cove, but I asked those family members that claim to have seen a Black Panther no more than 12 yards to 15 yards away in front of them. And, they were driving down the road and, I'd gotten that part of the story and there was 3 of them that witnessed it. And I've got to talk to another family member, next time I see him when I go visit people back home. But the guys that were there, the family members, both of them, I took them both off to the side, and I said, well, how big was this Black Panther? And just to give you a quick rundown of the story, they were driving down the road, and they saw this thing, in the middle of the road, so they slowed down pretty much to a dead stop almost, and 15, about 12, I'm going to be generous and say 12 to 15 yards in front of them when they stopped the truck. There's this big black panther. But both of those two cousins of mine, when I asked them, I said, how tall was it, on all fours? And both those guys are about my size, or a little bit bigger, about 6. One of them's about 6'1", about 6'2", and the other one 6 foot, same size as me. They said easily 3 feet high at the top of the back, up to about the waist.
What was the location?
This was in Comanche County.
Oh, wow. Out in the country.
Yeah, out in the country. Yeah, Comanche County, for the most part, is rural.
Oh, yeah, I know
the county seat. The county seat is, I haven't looked at the population lately, but I would say no more than maybe 8,000 people.
Well, when you go through the city of Comanche itself, it's like there's nothing.
There's nothing. There's just a big old oak tree in the middle of the town square.
That's about it.
But and so all the surrounding areas, you have to travel. Let's see, you have to travel at least 30 minutes.
Past Colleen, right?
No. Yeah. This is further up north. But in Comanche County, the county seat is Comanche, Texas.
Yeah, Comanche.
You have to go 35 minutes towards
northwest.
From here. Yeah, kind of northwest from here, from the Austin area.
You go through there to go to Abilene and all that.
Yeah, you'll go through Brown County, which is the neighboring county. But Brown County, Comanche County, for the most part, are rural counties.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot like San Saba County. San Saba County and Comanche County are almost the same as far as just how rural the whole county is.
Okay.
But they told me, it was no doubt. They said, both of them told me, we saw a flesh and blood black panther. And from the tip of its nose to the rump, not the tail, he said, easily 6 feet long.
Wow.
Easily.
Wow.
It was holding a fawn. They didn't specify. It's hard to tell how old, but I would venture to say it was probably one that may have been 6 months old, pretty big enough to keep up with the mother, right, with the doe. And he said it was just carrying it around like nothing, like
a rag doll.
Yeah, like nothing.
The only thing that could be, if it's not some sort of anomaly,
cryptid.
Yeah, some sort of cryptid, it would be a jaguar. Which, then it's hard to hear
that was
the jaguars
right on my brain.
that far up north
from Mexico.
From Mexico, yeah, typically Mexico, because you're getting into Mexican folklore. We're going to do a show about that too.
Mm-hmm.
The jaguar. Here's a connection though, and I'm going to make this connection. The Jaguar Knights, of course, the Aztecs had them. The Mayans had them. The Mayans,
Warriors.
They worshipped Zipi-Totec. And Zipi-Totec, or Zype-Totec, as some people pronounce it.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, it's Xipe, I think, if you want to look it up. Zipi-Totec was a bloodthirsty jaguar-headed deity. Yeah. And that the people in southern Mexico believe...
Jaguar god.
Yeah. Speaking of a friend of ours, he's from southern Mexico. We just talked about him earlier when we took a break or whatever. He actually was from southern Mexico. Kid grew up eating iguanas and whatever down there in the Yucatan. He believed in Zype-Totec, that was like a real thing to him. And he believed that it was a demonic entity. Of course, the Catholic Church turned it into, this is evil.
Yeah.
Sure it was to begin with, but it was no longer religion. It was just something it was a horrible demonic entity that they were worshiping. And he said that this thing would appear to people regularly down in southern Mexico. People would see this jaguar-headed demonic entity, that it was like a black cat. And that goes along with what we were talking about, about the demonic cat or whatever type thing. And then the whole demonic pantheon of demonic gods, or they're not gods to me, but they're false gods, And then, of course, you hear about these Black Panthers, these things that you're talking about, like you were talking about Will Barger, and then you're talking about up there in Comanche County. They're all over Texas. Yeah. And you can't mistake them. I mean, there are, like in one episode you said there are no bears in Texas. Well, there are actually black bears, not very frequent. It's very rare, but they do appear in southern Texas.
Yeah, they are very rare.
Most of the southwest of southern Texas, Del Rio area, I've heard about them being in that area.
Well, a lot of you get some bears that come up from Mexico when you get to that part of the state, but as far as bears actually inhabiting Texas,
that doesn't really happen.
Because you also have...
So you can't mistake them as black bears.
Yeah, you can't.
People like to say that, though.
Yeah, a lot of people do. And another detail with that story, those cousins of mine, they said that from the rump to the tip of the nose was 6 feet. He said the tail itself was probably anywhere between 4 to 5 feet long.
Was there any details on the chest, maybe?
No, they said it was all black.
There was no
black.
spotting.
Or maybe
They
like a
could-
sizing on the chest, maybe? Like, was there
Well, they caught a side view of it, and they said it turned around and looked at the headlights, and they said they saw the
profile.
eyes. They saw the profile, but then when it looked at the headlights towards them, the eyes lit up because that's what happens at night.
Right.
He said it was just sitting there, and it was just kind of lumbering along, and as soon as it looked over, acknowledged that the vehicle was there, that it just started making its way to the fence, jumped over the fence. This was approximately 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about that. I said, well, it's not too unusual because, I had another friend from Brown County. He was telling me a story that one of his hunting buddies, I got to asking about, hey, have you heard any strange hunting stories, so on and so forth? And he told me a story about a friend of his that was out fishing near Coleman, Texas. And there's plenty of creeks and rivers out there to fish. They said they were out there at night and they kept hearing a strange sound. And he said that his friend told him, and, he couldn't make out what it was. They said when he came up on it, he found a gator out there.
Wow.
A gator. So a lot lot of these animals pop up in the weirdest of places.
Well, there's about that in East Texas too.
Mm-hmm.
Like those gators, they'll travel through those channels, and you'll get them in Beaumont. Like I had a buddy who said, "You go out there in Beaumont, anywhere in that water out there,
You'll
he goes,
find
there's
them out
gators
there.
out there, man."
Yeah.
It's still swampy enough out there that they'll make their way that far north.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's bayous all the way down the Gulf, and that all connects to Louisiana.
All those channels that you'll find them out there. That's definitely for sure. So. That's crazy. That's a crazy story. Because I know that there are a lot of people that have seen these things, but you had your own family.
Yeah, and I know them, and like I've said before in a previous episode, I want to learn about all this stuff because I tell them about it. They go hunt a lot more than I do. They're always out there hunting, fishing, doing all this
Sounds
stuff.
like my family.
Yeah, so a lot of it is just look. I tell them I'm simply telling you because you do all this stuff, so you need to be aware of these kind of things that are out there.
Yeah.
You never know. You can't think, oh, gators are only down in the swampy areas of Texas near Louisiana and all that stuff. No. They found a gator up there near Coleman, Texas. And he said that was the trippiest thing that when his friend told him about it, I was like, yeah. But, makes you wonder how it got there.
Yeah.
And, of course, also when you think about people, not too many people are always out scouring all over the countryside. People across this country think that we got hunters and fishermen always out there in the midst of nature 24/7, and that's not true.
No.
And there's so much land. When you look at the landmass of North America, there's so much land out there that has not had any type of human
It's completely secluded
presence. Yeah. If they haven't had it hardly at all. And my guess is if you got a lot of land out there that is not been traveled through or traversed by human beings, at the most it may get traversed once every 20 years.
Right.
That's just my guess. But to see a lot of these weird creatures to me is not too far, not too far fetched. I could.
Now, talking about family and creatures, I've got a flying cryptid, well known in Mexican folklore. I actually received this story from a great aunt of mine, and it's there's no location. It's Texas-Mexico border, the border belt, or the
Did you
Rio
say
Grande.
flying cryptid?
For flying cryptid, Lechuza.
We're not doing flying cryptids, dude. You
Look,
know what?
we're
Over
on the
there, that's where you
folklore.
can go with that bull crap. I'm just messing with you. I'm messing with
And
you.
around the corner, take that crap around the corner. No, I'm just kidding.
Just kidding. Go ahead.
And it's not necessarily a sighting. It's just more lore, more tradition. And my great aunt told me that it's a
Lechuza?
friend of hers. Yeah, it's a Lechuza.
Explain to the audience.
Allegedly, Lechuza is a bruja, which is
A witch.
That shapeshifts into a giant bird with an elderly woman's face.
Mm-hmm.
And allegedly these beings, these beasts, are known for stealing babies, and that's part of their brujeria.
Also running EBT scams.
EBT scams, yeah,
card.
with the Lone Star and whatnot, falsifying birth certificates.
No, we're kidding.
I'm just kidding.
But there is some nasty stuff attached to this
the curses
scorpion.
are.
It's said that, the elder that spoke to my great aunt about it spoke of her own grandmother, who was allegedly killed by this flying cryptid. So that's what I was saying. That's more lore, maybe more tradition or I wouldn't say origin, because you hear about the Lechuza all over Mexico and southern part of Texas. But so allegedly her grandmother and another woman, a friend of hers, had gone to the river to wash clothes, which was a daily routine. And according to the story, it was a daily occurrence that a Lechuza would fly overhead every day. And this particular day, her mother was in bad spirits, or her grandmother rather was in bad spirits, and began to curse or cuss this flying beast, this cryptid.
Do you give a description?
Not in this particular story, but with the lore and the whole tradition, that's normally an owl or a white, can be white or black. Sometimes 5 to 7 feet, sometimes with a wingspan of 10 to 12 feet, and that it has an elderly woman's face.
Oh, but then sometimes it's like feeling cute. Think I'll be a young woman today.
Right, feeling cute. Think I'll be a sparrow today. So the elderly woman decided to cuss this flying cryptid, and the Lechuza then turned back and dived straight back, pushing the woman down, where she struck her head on a stone along the side of the river, instantly killing her. And the elder's mother was left an orphan. And it's said through tradition and lore and the whole Mexican heritage deal with the Lechuza, it's said, when sighted or approached, do not whistle.
Do not whistle, yeah.
Do not whistle. Do not heckle the Lechuza. That the best thing to do, that the elderlies have said, is to wish this beast or this bird or this animal, this witch, well on its journey, and you will be unharmed. With that said, guys, keep your head on a swivel, kids.
Yeah. Yeah. The Lechuza story, I know Scorpion has a Lechuza story. I can get him to tell it one day, but it's like, basically, it's pretty short. It was just that the people that when he first moved into the house he lives at in Montop, when his parents live at now, when he was a kid and he first moved there, that the other kids said that they found a woman tied to like she was hanging from the fence because the people that lived there before caught a bird and hung it from the fence, and the next day it was a woman. Wow. And of course, the kids in that neighborhood, they believed that story. And of course, and so he told me that story, that they would always bring that up, saying that happened at his house.
Well, oddly enough, brother, I know I mentioned it in another episode, and I told you that I had a family story in regards to a Lechuza.
The Lechuza, yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, I've not been able to get back and
why are you bringing it up?
Well, no, my point is
I'm all like, yeah, you're just going to let us down.
I'll give you the quick overview, because I still want to go back and quiz my mom.
Wait till you get it, though.
No, well, I'll give you the quick overview, because I will be able to tell it, because it correlates with that hanging bird story you just mentioned.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, it correlates with that, because just to give you the quick brief overview is that a great uncle in my family had been having issues with a Lechuza, and not so much him, but the aunt. And long story short, that he set a trap and he caught it with a rope by the foot, and that during all this stuff, he was praying as after he'd captured it, sprung the trap, caught it, and he was praying and tying knots. For each knot, he was saying a prayer and everything else, and then he left it tied up went to bed, woke up the next morning, came back outside, and there was a woman at the end of that rope.
Wow.
I don't have any more specific details, but when I do,
you'll get them to us.
Oh, you know it.
All right. Well, that sounds good. This is basically Mexican folklore. We're going to do a show on it. Might as well just, I was saving this, Jim, for the Mexican folklore episode. Folks, you're going to get it early. I'm going to tell you right now, I got a story about the Lechuza, if you want to call it the Lechuza. We were driving the other day. I was with Anthony. We were talking about this, Tony, you guys. And I believe I was telling you guys how there was a story. There were eagle nights and there were jaguar nights in the pantheon of whatever in the Mexican folklore, or I'm sorry, the Mexican tradition of the Aztecs, and the Mayans. Yeah. And of course, you had all these different, the Toltecs, the Mixtecs, the Zapotecs, whatever, the different types of texts, whatever. But they all had these, the what?
The Olmecs.
Olmecs. Yeah. They had all these different types of, they were all sort of, different, but then the same.
Native Mexican.
the native Mexican Indians, yeah. And so what they had was a collection of different types of the animals that they lived around that they would name the coyote runner,
deities that they worshiped.
Yeah, and then they would name them the eagle night, the jaguar night. Well, the eagle night, I think that there was a correlation there between that and this flying entity that this person saw, because it looked like a person with a bird head, and that it would swoop down and it would attack people. Well, that was a legend for this young man that told me this story until it happened to his grandmother, his abuelita. She was walking home one day because they lived down in central Mexico, not far outside of Mexico City, in the area that was once the reign of the Aztecs. They had power in that region. Very dark, too. There was a lot of sacrifice. I know that the blood that was spilled there was just ridiculous. It was like the human sacrifice was on a level that there's never been anywhere else on Earth that we know of archaeologically. They have just uncovered just tons and tons of death. And for everything, the rain, the sun, everything, blood had to be spilled. Right. Heads had to be cut off. Hearts had to be pulled out. It was ridiculous. And so there was a legend of this bird type person that sounds very similar to the Lechuza. It had blacked out eyes, like it had no eyes, I guess, the way he described it. They were either described as being blacked out or they were just hollow. And this entity would swoop down and it would attack people. And one day his grandmother got out of off the bus and had to walk like several kilometers to the house. This was something she did every day. They were very poor people. And that this thing, she heard rustling around in the brush, and she saw where she heard what was like an animal like suffering, being killed, like calling out. And it was like, whatever. And he said that it sounded like something was being killed in the brush. And she looked and she saw this what looked like a human on top of this animal. She didn't specify what the animal was. I'm assuming maybe like a deer or maybe a livestock animal, and that it was an animal being killed, and that it turned its head toward her, but it had a bird type head. Yeah. And so this thing immediately lost interest in the animal and swooped toward her, and she began to run away like in the opposite direction through a field off of the main road. And then it actually swooped over her, according to him. His grandmother told him this story, picked her up and then started to take her in the air, and she began to struggle and whatever, and her jacket came off, and she fell like 15 feet. And as she began to crawl away from the spot where she fell, this thing realized that it had dropped her, went swooping back down. At that time, a vehicle was driving by, and that she ran toward the vehicle, waving the vehicle down and slamming herself into it and slapping on the glass. And these people, they slowed down. She's hysterical. These two farmers gave her a ride. She got in the vehicle with them, and then this thing swooped down and hit the vehicle over and over again, trying to get to this. She said that it got right down in the glass in the window where she was at in the back seat of this car, and was just, she said it was like you could see through the eyes, and what was back inside of what should have been the head, there was like just red ember growing, like glowing. And that the mouth was like it was just, it looked like a rotted bird head, like it was rotted. and there was this tongue that was just kind of hanging out of it, and it had human-like hands, but it was with claws, and then it tore part of the metal off of this car. This supposedly happened back in the 60s when the cars were steel, according to what he said, and that this thing pulled and tore. And they got
muscle cars.
Yeah, and of course they got to the house and they were like, Lechuza. I mean, there was a Lechuza. They said that it was absolutely a Lechuza, and then it had blood on its hands, like it had, and where she had been picked up, in the air. He didn't say how high or whatever she went, but that she fell, and of course she had sprained her ankle, but it didn't even stop her. The adrenaline propelled her, and that she was okay other than that, and a few scratches in her she lost her jacket, and she got some cuts on her shoulder, but this thing had talons, on like where the legs should have been. They were like talons. And this entity just reminds me of like these headdresses that the Eagle Knights wore, and I know that there's a lot of legends and stories of these gods that they were eagles, they were jaguars, like we're talking about Zyptotec, the jaguar. And so that story was, that was pretty crazy, that story. And that is my most, I guess, what you would call it, prolific. I don't know, is that the word? Of the Lechuza story. That was the most terrifying one that I've heard of. I've heard another one but it was more like that old hag. And we're going to get into that at some point, in another episode. But there is one other story that I'm going to take it out with. How much time do we have to finish this out and round it out here? Okay, yeah, we got time. And this will take us to the final minute here, folks. We're going back to Taylor. This happened to 3 friends of mine. I'm not going to give their names until I can confirm with them, because I might even be able to get one of them in particular to come on the show and tell the story. And this story happened in front of a friend of mine's house. They were waiting for her to come home, and this was in high school. They were in high school, and one of them was real good friends with this particular girl, and they were waiting. And I know all 3 of these guys very well, and they see this guy coming down the street. He was dressed like a normal human being, just like a normal guy. He was, what they said, was wearing like a black jacket. He was wearing all black, but he had like a normal cap on his head, like a ball cap. And they said that in front of him, walking in front of him, were 5 dogs, and they were all black. They said that they were not normal dogs, though. Like he said that they were all different. They weren't like all uniform. They, according to them, they weren't like all Rottweilers. They weren't all one type of dog, German Shepherds or whatever. That they were all different black dogs, and of course their eyes were glowing.
It's a dog assortment.
An assortment of black dogs, yes, but they were all black. And this guy was wearing black, but he was wearing contemporary, normal clothes, and that he was coming down the road. And they said that the way he walked, his right arm and leg would move together, and his left arm and leg would move together. And they actually stood there and showed me like the movement of this person. It was like very puppet-like. Oh. When he got to the car, he began to peer into the windows of the vehicle, and one of these black dogs, a really big, particular shaggy, ugly-looking thing, jumped up on the hood. Now, you might ask yourself, why didn't they turn the key and leave? Well, they didn't turn the key and leave because they couldn't. The battery was dead.
Oh, that's
like
bizarre.
When they tried turning it was just absolutely dead. And I've heard this before, where something supernatural happens and batteries die. I worked at a job site where that was happening, and people were, the batteries were dying. The battery was dead, and this particular man, entity, I don't know what you would call him, they said he looked Hispanic, like a normal, ordinary Mexican man, and that he had dark skin, but his eyes were hollowed out, just completely black, and it looked like somebody had pulled his eyeballs out. That's what they said. Wow. And it was dark, and they said that he was looking in the window, and in particular looked in the back driver's side window of this car. And I know this guy that it happened to, he's a couple years younger than me, but he was like literally kicking and screaming, trying to get to the other side. And the guy that was on that side wasn't going to let him get out, to get away, because this guy was hysterical. He thought these dogs are all around the car, these black dogs. Yeah. And he said that the guy opened his mouth really, really wide, and it was just like his normal looking teeth. They weren't like, canines or anything like that. But he said that it looked like his tongue was kind of sliding around inside of his mouth. It was very weird. And all 3 of them, like, they absolutely attest to this is the truth. This story now, the one friend of mine actually sent me a copy of this story, and I showed my wife. And I've actually showed you, Anthony.
That's really creepy.
The story, I've actually showed them his words about this story. This isn't something I'm making up, folks. And they saw this, all three of them, and I've talked to each one of them individually. And my brother and Scorpion and several other guys from the club have actually talked to these guys. Chief, I don't think you have, but we talked to these guys, and they told me this story individually. And so they said that the black dogs, they all just kind of kept. Then the guy kept walking, zombie-like, down the road. He kept going. The black dogs just kind of followed around with him. And then they turn, they look in the mirror, and he's gone. They could still see the black dogs for a couple minutes, and then they disappear into like a fog.
That's really bizarre.
Just like a hazy fog. That's what they said, and it was just like that. So that's that story, and that'll close out these black dogs and Lechuza and the weird Tex-Mex folklore. We'll call it Tex-Mex folklore.
Yeah, we got a lot of that.
Yep.
I know we're never
the kukui.
Yeah, we're never in short supply. I mean, for all we know, this could, get a lot of our listeners out there probably tell us their stories. Hopefully we'll get more.
Yeah, absolutely. I've already gotten some lined up that were telling me. There was a guy that keeps trying to talk to me about his grandmother or grandfather, I guess, that used to drive a bus in Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear that. But yeah, folks, that's all the time we have for this. This was a 3-show marathon that we did with my buddy Chief.
Good times, guys. Good times. Thanks for having me, man.
You guys want to learn jujitsu? This guy teaches jujitsu. If you want to get a tattoo, this guy teaches he teaches tattoo. No, I'm just kidding.
Tattoo.
No, he does tattoos very well. He did a tattoo on Tony. You want to give a quick comment about it?
Yeah, it hurt.
Wow, well, that's to be expected from a millennial. No, seriously, he did a tattoo on him. It looks really nice. If you want, you could take a picture and put it up on the thing and show everybody what a good job he did on it. Forsaken Tattoos, ladies and gentlemen, that's Chief. And if you want to hit me up to get Chief tattoo so I can get a good fat commission off him, and I'm just kidding. No, seriously, and then I'll send you over to Chief and he can tattoo you up, man. Let me tell you, he's a good artist, man, this guy. And so that's all the time we have for this, and I appreciate it. DasWolfman88@gmail.com. DasWolfman88@gmail.com. Also, Wolf and Sal @gmail.com. That's Wolf and Sal @gmail.com. It's not hard to remember, folks. Also, like and subscribe.
Definitely.
Get on the YouTube and let me know what's going on, guys.
If you guys can't tell your story, hey, write it up, send it in to us, and we will do our best. We'll get to it as fast as we can, but we do want to hear your stories, man.
Well, Chief, you can Chief's being very rude to Sal.
Sorry, guys.
I'm the one accused of being rude all the time. It's really Chief doing it. No, Chief's trying to be covert here. He just wrote upside down for me.
That's awesome.
Field.
Sorry about that, Sal.
He just told me what it was. Field. You know what? This show's very loose. We're not up here trying to rehearse or anything. We just talk and do what we got to do. Field investigations. That's what Chief is doing and he's going to be doing that for us now. We just got him to kind of partner up and do some investigating with us because I don't want to go out in the field, but I'll send these two guys out there to do it. Then I'll be on the phone with you on the show by myself. It's a sad day, guys. The Lechuza has gotten Sal and Chief.
The Lechuza has eaten Chief.
We are 86% sure that Lechuza has devoured them.
Deep fried.
And now their souls are lost forever thanks to their lust for wanting to see monsters.
It's the kukui.
The kukui strikes again.
The chupacabra sucks.
Yeah. So, guys, that's all the time we have for today. Like and subscribe, and I appreciate you tuning in. You want to say goodbye, gentlemen?
Yeah, definitely, guys. It's been great. It's been fun. Remember, like, subscribe, and even comment. We want to hear what you got to say.
Absolutely.
Future episode, hey, we're going to cover some comments and answer those comments,
Once again, thanks for having me, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
I am excited about this endeavor, and if you guys have any stories or something that you'd like for me to go out and investigate upon approval, we would like to accommodate you there. If we dig the story and approve it, we'll go and check it out.
Yeah, and approval, we're not going to go on private property that someone's going to shoot us. Here in Texas, you get shot going on private property. But
for sure.
Absolutely. Especially here in Texas, guys, you got stories from the Lone Star State, let us know. And that's all the time we have. I'll see you guys later. Paranormal Roundtable.
Definitely. Y'all have a good one.
Night-night.